everybody, and welcome to the new Blossom Crochet tutorial. In this episode I will be showing you how to make this amazing 50-50 granny square. So obviously, for obvious reasons, I've called it the 50-50 because it's half traditional granny and it is half solid granny square. So I just thought that this makes a really interesting pattern. It's really different, and obviously when done using some variegated yarn it looks absolutely amazing. And again, this is done using my seamless granny technique so that there are no obvious seams at all running through the whole of the blanket, so it remains perfectly square and it should lie flat if you remember to keep your stitch count correct. So as I say, this is a complete 50-50 granny square, so the whole thing is half and half, and hopefully next week I will share this tutorial. I just wanted to give you a little heads up in case you wanted to wait and do this one instead. Now excuse the colours, but I was literally just using up some scraps to make sure that the pattern actually worked out well. But hopefully next week I will be showing you this pattern. It is the 50-50 granny pattern again, but it is alternated, so we have a couple of rows of granny and solid, and then we switch it around to make the solid and the granny, and then after a couple of rows we change it again. So again, it just gives a really interesting and different pattern, but using the same techniques that you will learn in this particular video. But I will be doing a tutorial on this, as I say, hopefully for next week. But for now, let's just crack on with the 50-50 granny square. And remember, if you do make this, then please do tag me on Instagram and also use the hashtag 50-50 granny square. I will leave all the information in the description box about the exact hashtag, the spellings, and also all of the things about the yarn that I have chosen to use for this video. So for the tutorial, I'm going to be using this Hayfield Spirit DK yarn, and this is my favourite shade, which is the Sundown shade, and I'm going to be using the recommended hook, which is the 4mm. But you can obviously use absolutely any yarn that you want for this project and whatever hook size it recommends, so you can use whatever you like. So obviously we're starting a general granny square, so you're going to need your slip knot on your hook. And as always, if you need any slower versions of the things that I'm doing, then just nip and check out my beginner series. So you're going to start with a chain 4, so 1, 2. So I've got my chain 4, and now we need to slip stitch into that very first stitch next to your slip knot to create a little circle. So you're going to insert your hook into that first stitch, yarn over, and pull through both of those loops to make a slip stitch, and that will then give us that little circle there to work all of our stitches into. So now the first round of our granny square is all the same, so I'm going to chain 2, and that counts as our first treble crochet. So remember, I'm working in UK terminology here, so in the US this is your double crochet. So that chain 2 counts as our first one. So then we want to do 2 more treble crochets into that center ring. So remember, again, double in the US. So yarn over, insert into that center space, yarn over and pull up. You'll have those 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. I'm going to do that one more time. So yarn over into that center circle again, yarn over and pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and that has created our first little cluster of stitches. So they're going to be our sides. So now we want to create a corner by doing a chain 2, so 1 and 2. We then want to create our next side, and we're going to do that by doing 3 treble crochets. So back into that center circle, yarn over and pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. That's 1 and 3. So that's our next cluster of 3 trebles. Chain 2 to create the corner again, and then another set of 3 trebles, So 1, 2 and 3. So again, chain 2 to create your corner space, and then you can see now we've got 3 clusters of stitches. So obviously we're going for a square here, so we need to add one more side. So again, 3 trebles into that center ring. So 1, 2 and 3. So that is all of our sides completed, but obviously we need to finish off this corner space. So you want to do your chain 2, and then we're going to slip stitch into the top of that chain 2 that we did, which counted as our first treble. So we're going to go 1 and 2. So that second stitch there, we want to insert our hook into that stitch and slip stitch. So yarn over and pull through both, and that will close off round 1. So you can see now you've got the start of your little square. So this granny square we will actually be turning each round. So we want to do a chain 1, and then we're going to turn it around, and we're going to slip stitch back into that corner space. So insert your hook into that corner space and yarn over, pull through both. So we're now working straight up out of this corner space, and that just gives a nice perfectly square seamless granny. So it's not going to distort or twist on you as you work up, it's going to stay perfectly square. So we want to chain 2, which is always going to count as our first treble, and we're going to work our first half of this next row. We are going to be working as a traditional granny square, and then the second half of the square we will be working as a solid granny square. So that chain 2 is going to count as our first of 3 trebles for this corner space for our traditional granny. So we will finish off the other half of this corner when we get back around. So the traditional granny is the 3 trebles together, so that's 1, and then into that corner space you want to do 2 more. So we've now got 2 trebles and 3 trebles. And because we're doing a half solid granny square, we need to make sure that we have the same number of stitches on each side, and so we will be doing a chain 1 in between each of our granny clusters. So that chain 1, and then we're going to skip over the top of all of these trebles and work into the next corner space. So our traditional granny corner space is going to be 3 trebles, chain 2, 3 trebles, all into the same space. So yarn over and straight into that corner space and do your 3 trebles. So that's 1, 2 and 3, and then you're going to create your new corner by chaining 2, and then you need to go back into that same space and do your next set of 3 trebles. So you need to make sure that in your corner space you have got your 3 trebles, chain 2 and your next 3 trebles as well. Okay, so again, chain 1, and we're going to jump across to the next chain space, the next corner space, sorry. So you will do your 3 trebles, but this is where things will change up. So 3 trebles, which is obviously the start of your granny corner. So we're going to have 1/2 of a granny corner in this space and 1/2 of the solid. So you want to chain 2 to create the new corner, and then back into this same chain space now we are going to start the solid granny square. So the solid granny square sections will only have 2 trebles in the corner spaces. So traditional grannies will have 3, and then the solid granny half will only have 2. So this corner will have 3 trebles, chain 2, and then 2 trebles back into this space. So 1 and 2. And so now, because we're on the solid granny, you're going to do 1 treble into the top of each of those 3 trebles. So into the top, make sure you've got the V on the top of your hook. So we've got 1, 2 and 3. And then this next corner space is going to be a solid granny corner, which is going to be 2 trebles. So in that corner space, 2 trebles, so that's 1, 2, and then chain 2, and 2 trebles back in that same space. So 1 and 2. So the granny corners and the solid corners are different, so you do need to make sure that you remember that, otherwise your square is going to end up all kinds of wonky. So 2 trebles, chain 2, 2 trebles in the corner, and then 1 treble into the top of those 3 trebles. So 1, 2 and 3. That final treble can be a little trickier to work into because that is where we slip stitched back at the beginning of the round. So this final corner now has obviously got the beginning of our granny cluster from where we started from, but we need to finish off the solid side, so we need to do our final 2 trebles into that chain space. So 1 and 2 to complete the solid granny, chain 2, and then we're ready again to slip stitch into the top of that chain 2 from the very beginning. So into the top of that chain 2 you're going to slip stitch. So that is how your square should be looking at the moment. It is quite tricky to tell how it's going to look, but obviously the more rows that we do, it will become much more defined. So again, now we're going to chain 1 and turn our work again, and we're going to slip stitch straight back into that corner space again, and we're going to chain 2 to start our new row. Now obviously, because we have turned, we will be working the solid side first this time. So we have done a chain 2 to count as our first treble. So because we're starting on the solid granny side, we want 1 more treble in that space. So we've got 2 trebles. So the solid side will always have 2 trebles, chain 2, 2 trebles in the corner, but obviously where we start from will always have a mix of the solid and the traditional. So we've done our first 2 trebles, and then we're going to work along doing 1 treble into every single stitch. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trebles to work into. So again, always make sure that you get the whole of the stitch and work 1 treble into every single stitch along. So that is all of the trebles worked into. We're now doing a solid granny corner, so you should always be able to tell where your solid granny corner is going to go, because it will be in between your 2 sides of solid granny. So you'll do 2 trebles, 1 and 2, chain 2, and 2 trebles back into that corner space. So 1 and 2, and then again, now you're ready to work 1 treble into the top of every single stitch along this side. So again, you should have 7 trebles to work into. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and and 7. And now we are at the halfway point, so this next corner space will be half solid and half granny. So we'll finish the half solid, which will be your 2 trebles, 1 and 2, chain 2 to create your corner, and now we're back on the traditional granny side. So we will start this row back in that same corner space, but with a treble, but with a traditional granny stitch, which is the 3 trebles. So 3 trebles on this half of the corner space. You will get into the swing of things very, very easily after a couple of rows. So if it's all seeming a bit alien at the moment, don't worry, you really will get going with it quite easily. We're going to chain 1 and skip across all of these trebles and work into this chain 1 space. So we're going to create a granny cluster, which is the 3 trebles. So 1, 2 and 3, and then again chain 1, skip over this granny cluster, and we're working our next corner. So a traditional granny cluster this time, which will be your 3 trebles. So 1, 2 and 3, chain 2, and then back into that corner space you're going to do your 3 trebles. 1, 2 and 3, chain 1 and jump across those trebles to your next space and do your granny cluster of 3 trebles. Oops. It's 1, 2, 3, chain 1 and jump over this final cluster of trebles, and we're back at our very first corner space, which is the split corner. So we've already got the beginning of that corner in from our solid granny square, so we need to finish off with the other half, which is the traditional granny square. So it will be your 3 trebles in this final corner space. 2, 3, and then you must remember to do your chain 2 to make the actual corner space, and you're ready again to slip stitch to the top of that very first chain 2 from the beginning of the round. So now you can see it's starting to get a little bit more obvious, the definition with the solid and the traditional. So because we're turning every round, obviously each round will alternate. So some rounds you'll be starting with your solid sides, and other rounds you'll be starting with your traditional granny round. So I will do one final round with you, because that last round will be the same as the round after this, and so on and so forth. So I will do this one final round with you. So you're going to chain 1 and we're going to turn and slip stitch straight back into that corner space. And now again, because we've turned, we're working the traditional granny first this time. So you're going to chain 2 and complete the first half of your corner. So that chain 2 counts as your first treble. So you want 2 more trebles back in that same space. Chain 1, jump across these first cluster of trebles and do your next granny cluster in the chain 1 space. So your 3 trebles, 1, 2 and 3, chain 1, skip to your next chain 1 space and do your granny cluster, 1, 2 and 3, chain 1, and we're at our first corner. And obviously this is going to be a normal traditional granny square corner, because we're right in the middle of our 2 granny square sides. So you're going to do your 3 trebles, 1, 2, 3, chain 2 and 3 trebles again back in that corner space. So 1, 2, 3. Chain 1 and granny cluster in the next chain 1 space. 2, 3, chain 1, jump to your next one. 1, 2, 3, chain 1. And now we're at the halfway point again, so we're at the corner that is going to be a mix of both types of stitches. So your first half of the corner will be your traditional granny, so your granny cluster of 3, 2 and 3, chain 2, and then we're on our solid granny side, so we're only going to do 2 trebles to finish off this corner. So 1 and 2, and now again you're going to do 1 treble into every single stitch from the previous row. So always make sure that you get the top of that very first stitch, you don't want to miss that stitch, and you're going to work that all the way along. So I've done my treble into every single stitch, and then I'm on my solid granny corner, so it's 2 trebles this time. 1 and 2, chain 2 and 2 trebles back in that corner space to create your solid granny corner. And then again it's just 1 treble into every single stitch along. So again, always make sure that you get that very last treble. It can be a little awkward to spot because it's where we did the slip stitches and things in the last row, but make sure that you get the top of that very final treble. And then again we're back to where we started from, but we need to complete this final corner, which again is a half and half corner. So you want to do your 2 trebles this time because we're obviously finishing off a solid treble, solid granny row. Chain 2 and then slip stitch once again into the top of that beginning chain 2. And that is how you should be looking now. So you can see obviously the further on we get, you get much more definition between the solid and the traditional. So in theory I'm hoping you can use the last 2 rows to repeat over and over again, and you will be able to keep it perfectly square and it should work up really, really beautifully, just like the example piece that I showed right at the beginning. So yeah, the last 2 rows, so now if you needed to, you would just skip back to the beginning of the row where we started along the solid granny side and you'd complete that, and then again you would skip to where you start your traditional granny side first. So you should be able to use those last 2 rows to make this project as big as you like, or you can obviously leave it as smaller squares like these that you can stitch together, and you could actually create some really interesting patterns by mixing it up and having the next granny square along facing the opposite way, so you'd have the solid side next to the traditional side, and you could make some really, really interesting textures and looks as well. I think that would be amazing. So remember, as always, if you use my pattern to create anything, please do tag me in it on Instagram. I really enjoy seeing what you guys get up to and what you make using them. But for this particular amazing granny square, I really, really do hope that you've enjoyed the tutorial, and I look forward to seeing all the things that you make and the variations that you make with big ones, little ones, flipping them, all kinds of things. But I will see you for another tutorial very, very soon. Bye for now.